Good morning and welcome to BCP's Cabinet in February. We're very glad to be live on our YouTube channel. We've got an important morning where we'll be talking about our budget and our vision and big plan, so as well as a number of other items on our agenda. So thank you for joining us. Before we move into the formal agenda, I need to read out the housekeeping notice. Please note that this meeting of the Cabinet is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by myself as chairman. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Some people may need to dial into the meeting and will therefore not have the benefit of the visual. Please mute your microphone when you're not talking. If you would like to speak, please use the raise your hand function in Teams. If there are any recommendations moved that require a formal vote, these will be carried out by myself as chairman, asking for a response of for or against from each councillor on the Cabinet. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum as far as possible and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you. Okay, so then we move into the full agenda, which is item number 1, apologies. I don't believe we've received any, have we, Sarah?
No apologies received, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So that can move us to item number 2, which is declarations of interest. So are there any declarations that people would like to declare? Councillor Green, Mike Green.
Thank you, Chairman. It's regarding item, just check this, item 9, I think, isn't it? The High Street strategy. And for the sake of transparency, I'd just like to draw attention to my entry in the Register of Interests of our stake in a property at 89 High Street in Poole. I've been advised by the monitoring officer that this does not represent a pecuniary interest with respect to this agenda item, so I do intend to participate in the discussion, but as I say, I'd like to declare it for the sake of transparency.
Great, thank you very much, Mike. Do we have any other declarations of interest? Nicola Green.
Thank you, Chairman. In the interests of transparency and absolute consistency, I wonder if I could make exactly the same declaration in respect of item 9 on the agenda regarding property at 89 Poole High Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. Okay, I'm not seeing any other members raise for that, so we'll move to item number 3, which is confirmation of minutes, which I will happily propose and look for a seconder. Are there anybody wishing to comment? And can I have a seconder, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second them.
Thank you, Phil. That's great. Okay, not receiving anybody wishing to speak on this item, so I will we'll take that forward as a unanimous support of that, and we'll move to agenda item 4, public issues. It's incumbent on me to advise that in order to ensure public issues can still be addressed while meetings are being held under the COVID-19 local authority meeting regulations, all public questions, statements or petitions will, whenever possible, be circulated to the Cabinet prior to the meeting, and responses to questions will be published on the Council website and referred to at this meeting. I can confirm that we have received 2 public questions from Zoe Tees and Sue Chapman, both in relation to agenda item 8, Council Vision, Corporate Strategy and Revised Delivery Plans 21-22, and also agenda item 9, High Street Strategy, and 10, Wessex Fields Proposed Land Disposal. I can also confirm that we have received no public statements or petitions relating to items of business on the agenda on this occasion. Okay, so that moves us forward to agenda item 5, which is recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board to present any recommendations not otherwise on the agenda. So I'll call Steve Bartlett in. I'm not aware of any, Steve, but is there anything you would like to add in agenda item 5? Thank you very much, Steve. That's appreciated. Okay, so now we move to agenda item 6, which is the Q3 budget monitoring for 2021. And I'm presenting this item, and I'm very happy to propose it. Essentially, this does what it says on the tin. It's our budget monitoring report. Key highlights of it is we now move to a balanced position for 2021, which is something we can be certainly be pleased with. Incidentally, our pressures have grown since the last quarter this came forward, primarily down to the fact we've gone into another lockdown and the loss of income that entails. However, our position has actually improved because of the government's action around collection fund deficits, where they've advised these now need to be spread over 3 years rather than taken in full in year. So we thank the government for their flexibility in that allocation. Because we've got an improved position, what we will be doing when this report goes to full council is to looking to put the 13.3 million surplus into a variety of reserves. So yeah, very happy to take any questions on the paper and look to Councillor Broadhead to second.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'm very happy to second the paper. I think you brought out most of the main points, except just to congratulate you, but also the team on presenting the position that we're in now, to be able to balance the budget after the very different position we were in only 5-6 months ago is quite an achievement and a testament to all of the hard work that's put into it. But to do that and also be able to bring forward £13 million to put into reserves, and also to be able to bring forward, as we'll see later on in the meeting, the budget that we have, which is a budget which goes much further than money budgets before, I think is a real achievement. So, but happy to second the paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's great. Do any other members wish to speak? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we'll move that forward. Sorry, let me just. Yes, Councillor Brooks, Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just pleased to note in the report in the investment of 7.236 million in 21-22 includes 1.155 for improvements in highway maintenance, and that is specifically referring to Christchurch as well in that sum, and also a further sum of 453,000 to improve street cleansing standards across the conurbation. And again, I'm pleased to see that Christchurch is specifically mentioned. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that, Councillor Brooks. That's great. You know, we've made a clear commitment that we're going to be levelling up, services and council tax across the conurbation, and we're pleased that one of the first things we were able to do was to address some underfunding that had gone into Christchurch over many years. So thank you for bringing that up, particularly in relation to the street cleansing. Okay, I don't see any other hands raising wishing to speak, so I'll move to the vote, and there's no dissent, so I'll take that forward as a unanimous support. So thank you very much for your support of that cabinet. Okay, now we're on to a really substantial item for us, which is our agenda item 7, our budget and medium-term financial plan. Again, that's incumbent on me as the portfolio holder for finance to propose it. Very happy to do so. This is obviously a really detailed and important report for us as we're setting out our budget for the next year, and also our MTFP for the 3 ensuing years. It's always incumbent on me, but it meant very heartfelt thanks to our Sir Adam Richards and his wider team for their significant support in putting this budget together at a time when there's been a year like no other in terms of how the council's finances has moved at such pace because of the pandemic. We also need to, across directorate and across the corporate management board, thank you for the work there. And also, effectively, I wanted to take the time to mention the work put in by all councillors at our December budget cafe. We believe this should be, and we want this to be, a whole council budget to be proud of. Just before I move into the paper, and last thanks, I'll just thank Councillor Anger, who brought forward our Conservative June budget reset paper. What we see in the paper in front of us now is very much built on that. When we were saying at last June that there's a real opportunity and a need for us to be investing more into frontline services to help our communities deal with this pandemic. So thank you very much for everybody who has supported this paper so far. Some key highlights. I think it's, we've said this before, but I'll just reiterate it. This is a time to show our communities the support and leadership that we need, and to invest heavily in frontline services as we are moving in and out of this pandemic. I'm proud to also bring that forward whilst being able to keep council tax, very low at 1.55% on average, and not one penny more than was required to harmonise across the country. We're very clear that this is a time to keep money in our residents' pockets, and we're doing just that by having one of the very lowest council tax rises in the country, and certainly one of the lowest of any unitary authority. So we've been able to balance that low council tax and significant investment, which is important. I'll just pause briefly to run through some of those investments, and then I'll look for a seconder. So the details in the paper, but this is a budget that puts £30 million extra into adult social care. It's £7.5 million directly into services for vulnerable children. On top of that, we're doing something we believe which is nationally leading and groundbreaking, but absolutely needed. We're putting £1 million into helping our children catch up from the devastating impact of COVID. We all know, so many of our children are not at face-to-face school at the moment, and the challenges that will bring, particularly around disadvantaged groups. So that £1 million we believe can be really impactful locally. We're also, significant investment into the arts and culture. We put significant money into community safety as well, with 6 extra CSAS officers. And then we move into, we see it later on our paper effectively, but our big plan for our city region effectively. So we're putting 2.25 million into regeneration in the economy, whilst also delivering a £50 million futures fund for capital investments to really kickstart us building back better. So it's a budget of real hope. It's a budget of intervention and optimism, and we're very pleased to be bringing it forward. That's probably enough for us to be getting on with in terms of introducing it. And I'll come to Councillor Broadhead to second it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'm absolutely delighted to be seconding this paper because it is something that is very different, not just to what's come before, but very different to what a lot of other authorities are doing in the country. Many authorities are creating budgets at the moment which are just focused on not going backwards. But this is a transformative budget which, just at the time we need it, significantly moves us forward. And you've highlighted a number of those areas, which is what local authorities are supposed to do, to look after our most vulnerable, our services and our people. And some of the figures that you've already highlighted: £7.5 million into our children's services improvement plan, £10 million into special educational needs for our children, and in particular, I think one of the things that we really should be proud of, which you've led from the front on, is that £1 million catch-up fund for children, which is pretty unique in the country, because many people, many local authorities, many other politicians say that schools are in charge of their own destiny. It's not our problem, but of course it is our problem. So to be able to bring forward this budget just at the time we need it to look after our most vulnerable would be good enough. But as you've highlighted, it does much, much more than that. And the very fact that we are able to put such a substantial amount of money into trying to create that ambition and vision we have for our area, I think is also something that we should be very, very proud of. The £50 million Futures Fund, for instance, is our own money that we can use in our own way for our own priorities, particularly around infrastructure. And whilst we talk a lot about the fact that we have a lot of people living here and we are known as a city region, that comes with issues, particularly around getting around, housing and things like that. And those are issues that we can't shy away from, and we have to use all of the opportunities in front of us to push that forward. And again, this is a budget that does that. In my area in particular, that I look after, the almost £2 million into really funding regeneration properly, which will help us lift up our key areas, in particular Poole, which has a tremendous amount of opportunity, as well as the money that we're putting into our economic development and into our planning service, I think is very, very welcome. And on top of that, as you'd said at the beginning, that would be good enough if we had to do it by charging people more money, but we're doing that and having one of the lowest council tax rises in the country as well, which is a real incredible achievement. And what's more, I think in a very, very meaningful way, looking after all of our assets as well. So some of the very creative things that we're doing about making sure that we are not fire selling our assets, but we're assuring them for the future, is also very positive. So I think, very unusually, We've got a tremendous amount to be proud of in this budget. I'd like to thank you personally as well, as the leader and the finance portfolio holder, for really getting this in order in a very, very short space of time. But this is a budget that we should be proud of, and for that reason, I'm delighted to second this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. That's really appreciated. Okay, so I'll go to the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee now. There were no formal recommendations. Councillor Bartlett, is there anything you would like to add?
Nothing to add, thank you, Leader.
Great, thank you very much. I'll now move to other members of the council, and I see Councillor Farquhar has raised his hand. So, George.
Thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate having the opportunity to address the Cabinet today. I really welcome Councillor Broadhead's comments as regards the Futures Fund and the ability of that to transform and look after our most vulnerable, particularly relating to infrastructure. Not of course forgetting our 80,000 odd residents that have accessibility needs. My question today for your consideration is, I welcome and thank you for your reply on the 1st of February at the Overview and Scrutiny Board as regards the 2.5 million match funding for Folkestone Station to install accessibility lifts. Can I ask what progress is actually being made towards a decision, and who is responsible for keeping the train operating company South West Rail updated, and when was SWR last contacted? I also like to ask, because I didn't have the opportunity, or should I say that it wasn't picked up at Overview and Scrutiny, that there was a suggestion that a further 2.4 million should be bid for from either the LEP or the Levelling Up Fund, and I'd like to know if any sort of progress has been taken in that direction. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Farquhar. I'll address that question. I'm not seeing any other members wish to speak at the moment, so I'll address that question now. Those questions now. Appreciate your support of this, and my answer is relatively similar to one given to you at Overview and Scrutiny. What I can elaborate on there, also you've asked is who's effectively responsible in leading this. From an officer perspective, I can give you assurance that this is a priority right at the top of the administration. It's something I'm working directly with Graham Farrant and other officers on, and we are, as we said at the Overview and Scrutiny meeting, there's a myriad of different opportunities and solutions to this in terms of the Towns Fund bid, and working with Martha on that, and the other officers in transport that are engaged with this process. So it's across a real myriad of officers dealing with this. You also asked specifically about the LEP. Yes, I have personally been in contact with the LEP to ask for at what point this could be brought forward in terms of a LEP package. There's an issue at the moment in terms of the funding streams and the funding of a LEP and the announcement of new money, effectively. So there's a timing concern in relation to that. But we are having those discussions. So those, as I did at the time, Overview and Scrutiny, I'd also like to thank Tobias Elwood, our MP for the area, it was his negotiations with National Rail in the first place that opened up this dialogue when they agreed to commit some further money. So thank you for his support, and I thank other members of the public and councillors who've been putting this on the agenda, like Councillor Andy Jones, for a number of years. So it's moving forward. It's moving forward at some pace. We're looking at a variety of different options, and we believe, and this is exactly what Councillor Broadhead said, that the Futures Fund is entirely designed to address items like this when we need things to happen. But we need to be more proactive in terms of how we're doing it. So there's a due process to go through, but it is moving forward.
Thank you very much for that reply. May I just ask, and I do appreciate that reply, and I'm glad to hear that, and that it is at the highest level, and you're working forward, and that the Futures Fund certainly seems to be the most appropriate place, or the anticipated place, to get the 2.5 million match funding. And I appreciate that you've touched base with the LEP. But the other part of my question was, who specifically is responsible for updating the train operating company SWR, and when were they last updated? Because as I pointed out in the ONS, I received an email from them on the 1st of February, which indicated that they were somewhat in the dark as regards communication from the council.
Yeah, there's been multiple contacts with SWR, Network Rail, Council, the LEP, even since we've spoken effectively. So and at various different points of view of each organisation, I'm sure this is something that's been done, worked through at some pace. So in terms of who was the last, who at Network Rail or South West, Rail at whatever point, I can't give you that expressly in terms of a date, but it's an ongoing discussion that's happening at some pace, and with a variety of different stakeholders. We try and find the right solutions, which we think Futures Fund very well be a part of, but we look to build a plan around that as and when we get further towards a decision. Thank you very much. Okay, do I have any other councillors wishing to speak before I bring in our cabinet members? No, I don't see anybody. Nobody's highlighted. So, cabinet colleagues, please welcome to open up to any questions or comments you have in relation to the budget. I can see Councillor May Haynes. May.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have to say that this is a very exciting budget. It's very innovative, and as Councillor Broadhead has actually highlighted, that in the unprecedented times that we find ourselves in, I think this is a really good budget, because it's actually managed to not just put investments into our priorities, but also it is keeping council tax rises at the lowest possible. But I particularly want to mention that I am excited that you have actually managed to secure some extra funding for more security officers. This is one thing that we talked about when we actually became the administration, that we wanted to tackle anti-social behaviour as a priority, and I really welcome that extra funding. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Haynes, for the work you've been doing consistently in relation to community safety, and quite rightly raising it as a priority for us. Thank you. I've got Councillor Rampton. Karen.
Oh, thank you, Leader. Yes, just a few words from me on the adult social care part of the budget. You're describing it at paragraph 1. Bold, creative, dynamic, responsible and robust, and it's all of those things, but I particularly like to say how responsible this is, because that investment of over 30 million in adult social care, that's a 12% increase, and it is going to support our residents, particularly those who are most vulnerable. We've got pressures, we've got inflationary pressures, including national living wage, general market pressures. We've got demographic growth, particularly in our long-term conditions and our learning disability cohort, and a large proportion of the pressure is supporting our young people in their transition from children's services through to adulthood. I'd like to echo what you said earlier, Leader, and I'd like to thank our officers in adult social care, and of course our Section 151 officer for this part of the budget, and for those efficiencies which have been achieved without affecting our frontline services. Really well done, thank you, it's absolutely amazing. Leader, I'd also like to mention the additional investment. It's a relatively small amount. There's £60,000 of new money, and that is going to really enable us to kickstart our new journey towards assistive technology and tech care. And I'm really excited about that, and the promise that holds for the future, which can, in time, transform the lives of the people that we are supporting and caring for. So a great budget. Thank you very much. Very happy to support it, Leader.
Yeah, thank you very much, Karen. And yeah, I completely agree with the opportunities around assistive technology, where we can help people to stay in their own homes and live effectively healthy lives. and focusing on what people are able to do, a strength-based approach that enables us to deliver, should be really, really impactful for our communities. So thank you very much. I've also got Councillor White. Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I really just wanted to echo one or two of the comments which have been made already in relation to children's services. I mean, we've said that supporting our most vulnerable children was an absolute priority for this council, and as I think everybody can see, we are indeed delivering on that. You mentioned 7.5 million in the MTFP next year, but of course there's also 12.1 million proposed over the next 3 years, so it's not just next year we're looking at. Also, you mentioned the $1 million to support our response to the pandemic, and a massive 10 million to go into send capital. So overall, I think it's a great budget for our most vulnerable children, and I'm very happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. That's appreciated. It's certainly been something I think we're proud of. That we're not just say that children are our priority, but we're actually trying to materially deliver on it. So that's very helpful. Okay, let's see. Do we have any other members of Cabinet who wish to speak at this point? Councillor Green, Nicola.
Thank you, Chairman. This really is an extraordinary budget to match the extraordinary times in which we live. And yet it does look forward to a time when our lives become much more recognisably ordinary again. Throughout my portfolio, which looks at our COVID response and public health, I see the daily challenges which our residents are facing. Their health and well-being are uncertain prospects, and many are suffering hardship. Our children face disruption to their learning and to their social development, while our young people are under immense pressure and looking forward to adulthood with long-lasting impacts on their mental health. This budget, I'm delighted to see, prioritises every one of those residents, and we're making good on our collective commitment to rebuild as we emerge from these darkest of days. We're investing in improvement in our children's services, which is vital, clearly, if we intend to help build resilience in our families as we go forward. Already been said about the £1 million catch-up fund, which has gone to make up for some of the opportunities which our children have lost. And there will be much more to come on this. In some, we're really stepping up to the commitment that you made in October. This might sound familiar. From Hamworthy to Highcliffe, Broadstone to Burton and Westbourne to West Howe, our purpose is to make your area the place where people want to be, where young people thrive, where businesses prosper, and where those in work flourish, where there is help for those who need it, and where the elderly are valued, where residents and visitors of all ages feel safe. We're living in wholly unprecedented and worrisome times, and it is our job to give some certainty, some confidence, and some optimism to our communities. Chairman, those are well-crafted and prescient words, and I enthusiastically support this budget, and I sincerely hope that members across the council will do so and follow your lead when it comes to full council in 10 days' time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. That's great, and it's always good to be reminded effectively of what we said we wanted to do, and then being able to do it. And I'll just reiterate that there's a significant amount of good work we've gone in from as far back as last June in terms of this. So thank colleagues for their support in it. Okay, do any other members of Cabinet wish to speak on the budget, or I'll look to move to the vote. Okay, that's great. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. We've got what we're doing here is we're recommending to full council. So it's 1A to I. Does anybody wish to speak against any of those recommendations? If not, I'll look to take forward that as a unanimous support. Okay, that's great. Thank you. I'm not seeing anybody showing, so we'll move that forward unanimously and look forward very much to taking that budget paper to the full council at the end of this month. Great. Okay, so that moves us on to agenda item 8, which is very much matched effectively in terms of, and I thank Councillor Green again for reiterating the words we brought forward when we became the administration effectively, because it's about having a vision, and then you back it up, through a budget, and so effectively our budget and our vision are very much entwined. What agenda item 8, council vision, corporate strategy and revised delivery plans does is sets out that vision. In our big plan document, which we talk about now. It also re-endorses the council's existing corporate strategy, which I think is a really important aspect for us to do as a new administration. So there's some real clarity in around the fact that we've got the existing corporate strategy that we support, and now what we're doing is just adding effectively a layer of further ambition through the council vision. And you'll see also in their colleagues the revised delivery plans, and I thank everybody, individual portfolio holders, for feeding into those. There has been some delay effectively in some of the delivery, which is only expected due to the pandemic. So there's been some edit to this, but now we've got some real clarity about what both the corporate strategy is, what the council's vision for the place is, and the revised delivery plan. So we can now go forward at some real pace as we bring this forward. I'll just touch briefly on what that vision is. We are saying effectively now that we need to raise the level of ambition. We've called it our big plan. So we want to raise the level of ambition for our area. We've got since we've come together as three towns into one council, we've got over 400,000 people. We're a similar size to Bristol. We're the 10th largest urban authority in England. And we now need to effectively, act like that, have ambition, that's like that, but also have a voice like that. So we believe this vision does enable us to do it. What is that vision in a nutshell? It's to become an absolutely world-class city region where everybody can prosper. So, we're very proud to bring it forward. We did take this through a few over scrutiny, so I'll come to Councillor Bartlett in a moment. And before I do that, I'll hand over to Councillor Broadhead, Phil, who I believe is seconding.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And just draw out some of the points that you've made. This can't be viewed in isolation. It clearly connects to all of the practical side of the ambition that we've just brought out in the budget. And equally, this is a work in progress. So this is very much demonstrating what our ambition is, and all the ways that we're going to be delivering that will be, already being worked on at the moment. But this is very much an umbrella and a platform for all of those things to come out of. I think it's also worth underlining your point that this is not a replacement for the corporate strategy. The corporate strategy is a great document. It really cements a lot of the corporate priorities for the council, and there's been very few, if any, changes to that, because that does what it says on the tin, and it really puts forward how we want the council to work. But I do think it is time for a much wider vision for our area. So having this big plan which sits on top of the corporate strategy, I think is really welcome. And actually, we've had a number of different forums where we've been walking people through the big plan and what it means, and had almost universally positive feedback, because I do think it touches on some of the really important things that we are looking at trying to do, not just as administration, but as a whole area as we go forward, bringing those 5 different pieces out there about our iconic landscape and kind of natural and physical geography, putting the emphasis on our seafront, because the seafront touches us all in some way or another, and we've just got a massive opportunity of our whole seafront estate to really make it world class. I think it's also important about regenerating Poole, not because Christchurch or Bournemouth aren't important, but actually because we need to do regeneration across the whole area. But Poole clearly has the most opportunities at the moment, and frankly has been ignored for too long as well. So that will be a massive priority for us going forward. I mentioned earlier on about the infrastructure piece and how we need to put that front and centre, both digitally and physically, of everything we do. And then that last point that you raised, acting at scale and pace. We've got some tremendous opportunities. Now is the time to spring forward. As I've said earlier on, other authorities in the country at the moment will be scrambling around, wondering how to get through the pandemic. I think now is the opportunity, a relative perfect storm of bringing everything together to make sure that our area and our people are looked after as much as possible.
Great, thank you, Phil. That's really helpful, and I appreciate your seconding of this. It ties. So I think we might have lost you there briefly, Phil, but that's great, and we appreciated your support, which was fantastic. And I think it also is just worth teasing out that this ties very directly into the area you're leading on in terms of regeneration, and making sure that regeneration and is felt across conurbation. We need to be delivering for all parts of this conurbation, and I know we will be. Thank you very much. Okay, so this was taken to overview and scrutiny. No recommendations forthcoming. Can I just come to Councillor Bartlett to say, would you like to add anything, Steve?
Yes, please, Leader. I mean, yes, you're right. There were no formal recommendations made, but there were some observations regarding the revised delivery plans. And as you say, quite rightly, there are obviously some very good reasons why a lot of the timescales, etc., slipped in there. But there was difficulty in tracking, because it's such a complex document. Some members felt it was difficult to track what had changed. And it was really an observation that a mechanism of showing how those changes were reflected in the future. And I believe you took that on board at the ONS meeting, so I'll say no more about that. Just from a personal perspective, I do have some observations which I'd like to make a little later with your consent. Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor Bartlett, thank you. And yeah, I thought that was a really useful comment relating to the how we actually track the changes in that document. It's fundamental that it's clear, so we will bring that forward for when that comes back next time, and thank the committee for their insight in that. Okay, so then that brings me on to the wider council membership, which and Councillor Bartlett, I believe you've just raised in that capacity. So I'll come back to you, Steve, and invite any other members of council if they would like to comment.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yeah, my observation is regarding the corporate vision. Now, you know, we have this very detailed corporate strategy and the revised delivery plans, and it seems to me that you know, it's working in the wrong sequence. You know, one would have a vision, you develop a strategy, and then you have detailed plans. What we have here now is a vision being overlaid on top of an already agreed strategy and delivery plan. And I'm not sure that it necessarily the vision reflects everything that is now in that strategy. Although I do understand exactly what it's trying to achieve, and there's very little that I would say that is particularly wrong with the vision statement in itself. However, I'm not sure that there is a connection there in the way that it ought to be in terms of the way you know, vision strategies and detailed delivery plans are laid out. But there are a couple of words, I think, in the vision that do make me a little bit nervous. One is, I think generally, first of all, I think that the vision is much more related to a planning document, is much more about giving an introduction to the area and the development of the area in terms of its, you know, its buildings, etc. And the consequences of providing a great place to live. But where I get particularly nervous is when we're talking about iconic cityscapes, because when you look at Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch, of course, it's very difficult to imagine you know, it being a cityscape in all of those areas. So one is the vision is actually being a bit prescriptive for a very large area of which it will not apply, particularly in terms of cityscape. I also get very nervous just in terms of Bournemouth, for example, where some developments have led to providing design clues for other developments. And I'll take, for example, the Hilton Hotel development, which then provided design cues for the BH2 and the Winter Gardens, for example, the Winter Gardens development, which was fairly controversial at the time. But, you know, I'm not sure that there is this widespread acceptance through the community that, you know, we do want a cityscape in these town centres. You know, there's still this vision that Bournemouth is essentially a tourist destination. It's a tourist town. Okay, it's got great other things, the university and all the other businesses associated with it, but it's still predominantly the reason that come to Bournemouth is because it is a tourist destination and it's the natural facilities and everything that go along with it that attract people here. Now, I think that the vision, as it's worded at the moment, does not pay sufficient attention to the tourism aspects of it. It's much more focused on an upbeat, modern business infrastructure type thing, and so that's just my general concern. As I say, you know, you couldn't read that vision and not really agree with most of it in there, of course, but there are just one or two of those words, and I think that need a little bit more consideration. So that was it, Chair. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. That's really helpful. And I think it's sort of two main parts to that, weren't there? So the first part was around how the vision ties into the strategy and the deliverables, and I'll just land on that one first, and then I'll perhaps come back and have some comments on the wider plan. So we thought it was very important as an administration to, when we came in, to not effectively. Obviously, we have different political priorities, and we have ambitions, and any incoming administration would want to set that out. We didn't want to effectively stall the work of the authority on what was a very good a corporate plan. So we thought it was really important for us to endorse the existing corporate strategy, and then but on top of it, we did think it was lacking in some areas, and we didn't think it had significant ambition, particularly actually in relation to items like tourism. And how we're actually going to create that world-class resort effectively where people can enjoy, from afar they can come in and enjoy, but also us as residents and our families and effectively can enjoy, and also then students who are staying here for their university courses, we create that place where they can enjoy. So we thought the corporate strategy was a very good document as far as it went, but it was missing from what a lot of what we believe is needed for our area, and basically where it really was missing was around ambition. So we believe there was a really important piece to come in and bring forward a document of ambition, which this does. I think everybody would agree we live in a fantastic environment. We've got some fantastic natural resources. It's not just the seafront, but that's outstanding. We've got the natural green space all around us. We've got good connectivity to London. We are in a fantastic place. But it's our responsibility to promote it and intervene as a council to really bring it further forward, which is what this document does. There may well be a point in time when it's the right point to evolve a corporate strategy. So effectively, we've got one document, but we certainly didn't want to. It's not the right thing for this council to do that now, to take forward a whole new corporate strategy, but for us to raise the bar on ambition. So that was the thinking in terms of that. You also talk about, and I thank you for the feedback effectively around the generic support of the document and what we're suggesting in there, but where it perhaps doesn't land. And there are two main parts of that, I believe, Steve, when you were talking about the iconic cityscape piece, but also the tourism. So I'll just touch on both of those before I bring in other members. I think it's really important to say one of the reasons we wanted to do this document is because it needs to talk to multiple audiences. It needs to be something we locally can really resonate with, but it also needs to be something that puts us on the map, that speaks of our intent, to attract the support of government and of inward investment. So I believe it does do that. When we're talking about iconic cityscape, you'll also notice in the document, we talk specifically around Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, and what those different areas need, and what those different areas need different results and different outcomes. So effectively, what iconic means to us, iconic cityscape is when you arrive in this place, that it's impressive and it actually feels world class. So it's how we can be impacting our train stations and arrivals there. What are we known for? What's world class about us? How can we regenerate the Bournemouth International Centre to make that a really standout world class destination? So it's saying our big plan needs to have some things that stand out and really speak of our ambition. What we also talk about is seafront, and it's not just to say that seafront and tourism are interlinked, but they're obviously fundamental. So how can we point more things at the seafront and make more use of our best natural asset? But you'll notice in the circle around the document, Steve, when we're talking about children, communities, and culture, again, all of that is about creating a world-class place. We've got a world-class, natural environment. Do we have a world-class resort? Well, we need to effectively make sure we have one, and we impact on that where we can. So I'll say the ambition ties exactly into what you're saying, Councillor Bartlett, and it has been heard, and I believe this document does enable us to deliver that. But I appreciate your feedback. Steve, is there anything you would like to come back on post my answer, or shall I move on? Perfectly happy to discuss.
Just a really good answer. Thank you, Leader. Yeah, very happy with that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, I'll move on to other members of the cabinet? Anybody would like to speak on this paper? Councillor Kelly, Jane.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, I am so proud of this vision document and the accompanying strategy that we see before us this morning. It's significant that fundamental to all our aspirations is a commitment to and an investment in our communities right across BCP, particularly post the pandemic challenges which many of them will face and are facing now. Our ethos is that communities are at the heart of everything we do. And so the Connected Communities section of our strategic priorities states that we will be empowering those communities so that everyone feels safe, engaged and included, whilst right in the centre of the corporate strategy circle are our vibrant communities where everyone plays an active role. Without a strong and enabled community, we cannot effectively achieve our goals. They're the basis of our success and they deserve our best attentions to facilitate their improved well-being and ability to thrive despite the inevitable challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane, and I really appreciate your passion for that, that community side and the people regeneration. Regeneration isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's got to come to life, and we're going to do that by the work you're leading in communities. Thank you. Okay, Cabinet, would anybody else like to speak before I move to the vote? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else showing, so I'll just remind us this is recommended at Cabinet A to D's. Adopt the vision, support the identification of the 5 big projects in that wider vision, confirm support for the corporate strategy and approve the revised delivery plans. So if anybody could show if they would like to address any of those recommendations, or I will move forward with unanimous support. No, that's great. Thank you. I'm not seeing anybody showing, so we can move that forward as adopted. Great. Okay, so that leads us to agenda item 9, which is the High Street strategy. So I'll come to Councillor Broadhead. Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to start with this item by thanking all of the members that have been involved in the various iterations so far. It transpires if you really want to get councillors involved and engaged, talk about your high streets, and it's and suddenly everyone's really interested, and that's great because of course we've all invested. We all know that there's an issue with high streets across the country, in fact across the world at the moment, and we're going to need a multitude of different answers. There's not one big bullet that's going to fix this issue, hence the reason why we brought forward this paper. So this is not the full high street strategy. This is a recognition that we've got a growing issue in this area, and we need to put a lot of time, effort and resource into finding a multitude of different options to try and address it. We've already had one all-member seminar where we talked about some of the emerging parts of this strategy going forward, which was really well involved from all councillors. Again, we had a really lively discussion on this at Overview and Scrutiny. I know we've got a recommendation coming forward from the Overview and Scrutiny Board, which I've already committed to accepting in full, but I'll let the Chairman talk about that a little bit later. But this is very much the first step, a recognition that we've got an issue here, like many people, and the leadership to do something about it rather than just talk about it. I won't go in tremendous detail into the paper, things to highlight. Firstly, item 4 talks around the reason that we're in this position and just brings out with some of the more worrying aspects of the challenge that we've got in this area. And I mentioned earlier on that is very much across the whole country. It's not new news that the high streets are in decline. This has been something that's been happening for some time. Of course, what's happened since the pandemic came in is that has largely been accelerated, which on the one hand presents a worrying state of affairs. On the other hand, as a kind of theme of mine today, potentially presents an opportunity for us to really nail this once and for all. On that point of the good position that we're in to move this forward at pace, section 6 of the report brings out some work that's been done by some external partners, and the Centre for Cities is a really good one, which actually shows that we are in actually a very strong position to start this piece of work. Other areas close by, such as Southampton and Portsmouth, are independently assessed as actually having much more scales of challenge than we do. So we're already coming from a slightly higher base in some areas. It may not seem like that sometimes, but because obviously people look around high streets and see that there are very clear, obvious difficulties, particularly around vacant units and some major high street brands that are going under. But we are building from a reasonable base, and to take Bournemouth as an example, the business improvement district us some really good stats year on year about the footfall. And actually, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a very, very steady increase in footfall on the high street, which on the one hand is positive, but doesn't seem to be borne out in reality. And I think that's largely because we are a destination already. So we have people that naturally come into the area, and that's not just Bournemouth, that's Poole, that's Christchurch, that's our 17 different high streets that we've got across the area as well. So we're already a destination. However, I think for too long we've used that as a bit of an excuse not to take to tackle the issue head on. And actually just having the high street as a tag on for our destination visitors is clearly not good enough. And results in some real challenges. Last year, the same Centre for Cities pointed out that the BCP area had the highest bounce back of high street footfall after the first lockdown, which is great news, isn't it? Not quite, because actually at the end of summer, when the tourists went home, we had the biggest fall in high street footfall in the whole country as well. So it shows that for too long we've been very, very reliant on that destination aspect. So as I said, this is a piece of work that will be ongoing. We're putting some significant time, resource and member engagement into finding a number of different solutions that we will have to put forward to try and address this issue. We're also leading on this on a national piece of work as well through key cities. I'm really happy to be the lead on that. So because recognising this is a national issue as well. But a few of the things that we'll be working on over the next couple of months, some design briefs for key areas across our area so that we can bottom out, and Councillor Bartlett mentioned earlier on some of the question marks over what within planning terms our area should look like. I think now is the time to get to the bottom of that and unleash the investment. We mentioned earlier on we've got a £50 million futures fund of our own money that is meaningful and we can really use in our own way to try and address this issue. Regeneration clearly is a big part of fixing a number of issues with our high streets, and as we've I'm sure we'll hear from shortly. We've got a lead member in Nigel Brooks who has some significant experience in this area, and one of the very first pieces that we'll be bringing forward will be a piece on direct intervention in those empty unit situation, so that we're very much leading from the front in trying to tackle the issue. So tremendous amount of work to do. You've got to start somewhere, and I think bringing this to Cabinet and saying this will be a priority for us going forward is the first step in what will be a tremendous amount of work going forward. But yes, I'll seek a seconder. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead, and I've got Councillor Oenga to come in. Mohan.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Very pleased to second this. I think everyone in the country is used to newspaper columns every weekend, almost every day of the week for the last several years, commenting on the, in rather sort of downbeat terms, the decline of the high streets. You know, obviously there's a truth to that. Sometimes I wish they wouldn't sort of keep commenting and exacerbate it. And of course that'll happen for many, many years to come. I'm delighted this paper represents us trying to do something about it rather than just complain about the situation. I'm a townie. I've grown up in many, many high streets, around many high streets. The high street still has a function going forward in the future, albeit maybe different to what we've known hitherto. And also, I would say this is portfolio holder covering culture. There's a certain heritage aspect of high streets as well, which I'm delighted is integral to this paper. So we're going to sort of protect, respect heritage of our high streets as well. But once again, very, very pleased to second this. I'll keep it short because I know Councillor Brooks wishes to speak after me. But this is a paper which is a call to action, and we're determined to do that. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mohan. That's great. And I know we've got a recommendation from overview and scrutiny, but I'll first move to our lead member, Councillor Nigel Brooks, to address the committee at.
Thank you very much, Chair. This paper very much supports the BCP strategy in the aspect of dynamic places. In that document, we make clear that there is an action to revitalise and reinvent our high streets, and that's really what this paper is all about. Currently, only days ago, we have over 130 vacant units throughout the BCP area, and that it does in fact exclude the Dolphin Centre and the Kingsland Centre in Poole. But it just shows, just at the state of play currently, that we hold quite a lot of vacant units. I guess when the lockdown lifts, we will actually see far more vacant units, as businesses have indeed struggled through this long period of lockdown to actually get themselves back on their feet. So in part of this paper, is what I was able to present to members on the 19th of January is a strategy for intervention to actually get some of these vacant units let. I was also able to present this at the called R3 meeting of businesses and retailers, and importantly the bid managers across our towns and on our coastline. And each of these meetings have come with a resounding support that there is a need to have leadership intervention to try and get our high streets back on their feet again. And it is in that sense that this paper really addresses these issues by giving a delegation and authority that we can actually move at a pace to bring our towns and to stabilise the vacant units. It's quite interesting that other towns and cities around the country are probably in a far worse position, where let's give the example of Bath and maybe also Oxford, they heavily rely on year-round tourist trade. We're not quite in that position, but nevertheless, there is a call for action to actually get businesses to feel confident, and indeed for our shoppers and our tourists to feel confident to come back into our town centres. And this is what all this paper is about. It's now a need to move at fleet of foot to actually start to take a position that we can help businesses, we can help retailers to come back into our town centres. And this is all part of this paper and the wider ambition that we have under a bounce back strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nigel. That's really helpful. And I'll just move briefly to Councillor Bartlett, which I believe might be having a computer issue. But Steve, we've got a recommendation from Overview and Scrutiny.
Okay, I'll be very brief because my computer's about to shut down and I can't do anything about it. So yes, the board were very supportive of this initiative, very welcoming. The only issue was that the ward councillors wanted to make absolutely certain that they were fully engaged in the development of the strategy and plans for their specific areas, and asked that that was specifically noted in the recommendation, which I believe Councillor Broadhead took on board and agreed to do anyway. So that's it. Thank you. And I will log in when this system allows me to.
We look forward to seeing you shortly, Steve. Great.
Thank you.
That did speed up my effectively finishing on what Nigel was saying. Nigel, what I wanted to say to that was, firstly, thank you for you bringing your expertise to this area. There's been some real passion and intelligence leading it, so thank you. But the word that really stood out for me was intervention. Effectively, we're going to intervene here. We're not just going to whinge about it. We're going to say our place deserves our support, our economy deserves our support, and we're going to do it. This is a big intervention, and we're really glad to get behind it. I certainly am glad to get behind it. But it may well just be the start, mightn't it? We now need to build on it and keep reiterating our commitment to these places, because it's not just economic, as Councillor Angus said. It's very much about the fabric of our place, isn't it, and how we all interact with it. And there's a real opportunity for us to do some really good work in this. So thank you very much. And obviously everybody else involved in the paper. So I'll now move on to wider council base. Haven't got anybody who's raised to speak. So I will go to the rest of the council, to the rest of the cabinet. Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak on this paper? I'm not seeing that. So Nigel, you look like to come back.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Bartlett, for the overview and scrutiny commitment to the project, really to get our towns and district centres back on their feet. I think everyone, as members and those people in our towns, our stakeholders, we need to actually see success come back. So I really welcome that ward councillors want to be engaged as well. I think there's a part specifically for them to play with our district centres. They are playing an important part as people are staying local, they're working from home, and it's more convenient in many ways to go to a district centre. So I think there is work that the ward councillors can do there in actually understanding some of the issues, bringing those issues forward so that we can actually look at this in the round. Thank you.
Great. OK, thank you very much. So we now take that to the vote. Before I do that, I just want to confirm that effectively, Phil, I believe you're moving it as amended with the recommendation from Overview and Scrutiny.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to be really clear, I thought it was for the sake of the formal process, good to hear directly from the Chair of the Building Scrutiny Board so we could move the recommendation before we accepted it. As I indicated earlier, happy to accept the recommendation in full, which, as Councillor Brooks has just pointed out, it's just cementing the fact that, of course, ward members are going to be involved in the process going forward. As I'd said, we've got 17 different high streets, not just 3. I think it's a given within the administration that when things deal across the area, of course, ward members are going to be involved, but absolutely happy to cement that in the process just to give that assurance. Therefore, I'd like to make a amended recommendation and insert the words and ward councillors after the word partners in the recommendation. So that will be the final recommendation would be recommended that Cabinet delegates authority to the Director of Development in consultation with the portfolio holder for economy and strategic planning to work with partners and ward councillors to swiftly develop a strategy and action plan enabling the delivery interventions that will support our high streets. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead, and Councillor Anger. Just you're happy to also second that. Yeah, great, which is fantastic. Okay, so the recommendation has now moved. Does anybody wish to address that, or I'll take that forward as unanimous support? No, okay, that's great. So we can move that forward unanimously. And I think it's just worth saying I fully appreciate the intervention from overview and scrutiny and effectively, but just to build on what Councillor Broad has just said, we have said really clearly that this is a council that will have residents at its heart, but also administration with members at its heart. So absolutely, it's our commitment that we will continue to do that. I was really pleased to see this paper as well as being, I think there's the 7th or 8th of our all-member seminars we're doing. So we're trying to bring much more engagement from a whole councillor base in, and so we very much welcome that recommendation. Okay, thank you. So now let's move to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item 10, Wessex Fields. Councillor Broadhead, Phil.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will be brief on this. This is part 2 of the Wessex Fields paper, and I'm really pleased that one of the first things we did in administration was to try and resolve this issue. We've got a massive opportunity in the Wessex Fields area to create something really special. It's not just about creating a kind of a brown industrial park. It's about utilising the fantastic efforts and relationships we've got with our University Hospital Trust, Dorset Hospital Trust that we've got now, and Bournemouth University to create something really, really special here, which is a Meditech Science Park. There's some fantastic plans here, and in order to move this forward in Cabinet in December, we agreed to sell a section of the land to the hospital. They're in receipt of some big capital funds, which would enable them to then work with us to then deliver that aspiration forward. So a super exciting part here. You mentioned earlier on, Leader, about making that sense of arrival when you come to the area really important. And this is a sense of arrival, an arrival point for a lot of people in the conurbation. And won't it be fantastic when this comes to fruition that one of the first things that people will see when they arrive in our conurbation is a really impressive research and science Meditech facility. That is a statement of intent about of what we're about. We can't do it alone. We need to work with the hospital. We need to work with our universities, hence the reason for bringing this forward. So there's a number of recommendations in this report, but really this is just the formal bit of outlining exactly what we'll be selling to them and how that will work. There's obviously confidential parts attached which go into further detail around the finances and bits and pieces as well. But this is now putting into action what we've always wanted to do here, which is create something which I think is going to create jobs. It's going to create key worker housing, but more importantly, it's going to create a new industry for us long into the future. And I'm really looking forward to working with our partners to take it and build this to fruition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. That's great. And yeah, I personally really like to second this. Actually, you've elaborated on why it's really important. And effectively, it's also something. One of the first things we did when we came in, wasn't it? A lot of these major schemes or opportunities have had, there was an element of time delay, and we wanted to put some energy and fresh impetus into them. So I commend you for working with our partners to bring this forward at the pace you've done it. Particularly, also commend the hospital and the universities for their support in trying to shape up what is a really quite dynamic and innovative scheme coming forward. So really pleased. And you're right to say as well, this is about iconic, isn't it? This is effectively underlining that word iconic, and about being world class. And a world class region has world class education, has world class healthcare as well. And I just close by drawing it back to effectively what we talk about in the big plan document, in the vision document. It ends with leadership, vision, partnership. We're trying to provide a leadership. There is a vision, and we're going to do it collectively in partnership, and that's with our universities, University Hospitals Dorset as well, and other partners. This is exactly what we mean: leadership, vision, partnership. So I'm really happy to support this, and whilst also looking forward to what will come up with the rest of the site, which we're retaining our ownership and opportunity to really make some impactful community benefit out of that as well. Okay, thank you. This wasn't taken to overview and scrutiny, so I will go straight to the wider councillor base, and I believe Councillor Lawrence Williams would like to address us. Lawrence, good to see you. Hello.
Thank you, Leader. I'm very grateful, and thank you, Councillor Broadhead, for bringing this to Cabinet. As I said last time, this has been a long time coming. I've been a councillor now for 10 years in this ward, and we've been talking about Wessex Fields for the whole 10 years, I think. I'm fully supportive of everything that you're proposing. I'd just like to confirm the road going through is a continuous road going through from the A35, the A338, I beg your pardon, to Castle Lane. That being so, you have my 100% backing on the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. That's appreciated. Councillor Broadhead, Phil, did you want to come back in on that before we move to the? No, perfectly happy. Okay, fine. So that moves us to the wider cabinet. Anybody like to address this item? That's great. So it's a really positive thing, isn't it? We're really pleased to be supporting it, and that's great. So I'll look forward to moving the recommendation as is, unless I hear otherwise. No, that's great. So we'll take that forward unanimously. And thank you very much to Councillor Williams for his contribution. I didn't. We've technically. I'm not seeing any raised hands on my screen, and we've technically already approved the item, and no other councillors had informed Democratic Service they'd like to speak. So, although I'm seeing some messages on the chat bar otherwise, so I will move on as we've already technically done that item. If Democratic could highlight if any other councillors are wishing to speak, that would be great going forward. Fine, so that moves us on to agenda item 11, which is the dedicated schools grant and an early years formula. Councillor Green, Nicola.
Thank you, Leader. Apologies, I'm dodging a bit of very welcome February sunshine coming in through the window, so apologies for being slightly off centre. Very pleased to bring this paper to Cabinet and onward to Council. It is, of course, budget setting Cabinet, and alongside the revenue budget, which we've talked to quite a lot already. One of the other papers to follow is another ring-fenced area, and that's exactly what the dedicated schools grant is. It is a figure of close to 300 million, million pounds, which is sent to the council to spend on all our schools, from early years through to our 16-year-olds who remain in school. It's as I say, a ring-fence grant, and while it is a council decision, quite properly and technically, the consultation has been done over the past few months in a very wide-ranging way with all our schools, with the Department for Education, and with early years providers. I would just like to take a moment, if I may, to speak to the well-known pressures within the high needs block, which is the area of the dedicated schools grant, which funds children and young people with education, health and care plans, and that includes our special schools, but also provision outside of the main, outside of the state sector, in the independent and non-maintained area. So some of our children and young people clearly can't be educated in there, their needs won't be met within our mainstream schools. So there's a wide range of provision in which they might find themselves, and this has caused an ongoing budgetary pressure. Those issues are embedded, they're historic, they're ongoing, and they're national. It's not only BCP which has to confront these issues. And of course, when you put pressure on one part of the sector, it puts pressure on the whole of the system. The deficit, as mentioned in the paper, is ongoing, and a subgroup has been set up by leaders within the system. And some measures are already having an impact, including increasing our special school places, and I shall speak to that in a later paper. However, it's not just about creating building, it's not just about creating school places. The whole system of how we make sure that our children with additional needs have the right provision needs a reset to ensure that the right children are held within the system and locally wherever appropriate, so that they can grow up with their peers. Outside of this paper, and in the one that we approved earlier on, which is going on to Cabinet, of course, there is a substantial investment that this administration is looking to commit to address and to provide that systems leadership, which I think we all need going forward. The paper also speaks to a transfer of 0.5% from the schools block, that's the main schools block, to the high needs block to start to address the deficit. This is an annual conversation which is held, and this recommendation has been brought forward with the agreement of the Schools Forum, and it's based on an allocation after all the schools have been funded at the national funding formula, which is something that our schools feel very strongly about. In terms of the early years single funding formula, I'm very pleased to say that the uplift which we saw last year of 8p per hour has been continued again this year. It's nationally raised with inflation, and that's 6p per hour for 3 and 4 year olds and 8p for 2-year-olds. And again, I'm very pleased to say that this is being passed on in full to the providers, and the centrally retained funding remains the same. It is worth, I think, noting the difficulty that the early years sector face in terms of their workforce, and that's before we deal with anything specific to COVID. And it is, of course, a very crucial sector in supporting the parents of our very youngest children in accessing work, as well as the early development of those children themselves. Just to sum up, if I may, it's really important to, I think, just to consider in setting these funding streams that they are, of course, based on a normal world. This is a historic way of funding our schools, and our schools are having to face some extraordinary pressures. So we owe them all our thanks for taking on this incredibly difficult work. I'd also like to thank those who've been involved in delivering the services within the schools, and that's not just teachers, but the staff support services, teaching assistants, really put their shoulder to the wheel in terms of providing pastoral support to our children. And then lastly, as always, to thank the school's finance team for dealing with some quite Byzantine formulae on occasion, and providing that interface between the Schools Forum and the Council. This paper was considered by Overview and Scrutiny. Chairman, I don't believe the Councillor Bartlett is back in, but they had no particular comments to make on it, and therefore I'd just like to formally move the recommendations and ask for Councillor White to second. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. It's really well put. Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm very happy to second this, particularly as someone who also sits on Schools Forum. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, and I attended the Overview and Scrutiny Committee where this item was put, and agree there was no material discussion to bring forward here. I'll just check to see if Councillor Bartlett is back in the room, which I don't believe he. Oh, okay, great. Steve, we're on the dedicated schools grant paper, and I believe this was obviously taken through Overview and Scrutiny and without full recommendations. Anything you would like to? Good to see you back.
Yeah,
and anything
thank
you'd
you.
like to.
I'm on my spare machine. Yes, thank you. It was, yeah, we've nothing to add to what's been said. Thank you, Leader.
Great. Okay, thank you. That was great. Fine. So now we will move forward to see if any other members of council wish to address. None have notified. So I'll move forward to cabinet colleagues. I think Nicola's really put the paper forward entirely fully. So, but if anybody else would like to speak, I'll take that now. No, so we move to the recommendations, and if I don't see any comment, I'll take that as unanimous. Okay, thank you. That's great. So then that moves us on again to Councillor Green. Nicola, agenda item 12, the establishment of Winchell City satellite at Summerford Primary School site. Nicola.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And these papers do follow very nicely from one another. And the Winchell Sea expansion, the satellite development, sits within our special educational needs and disabilities strategy. And as I've really mentioned in the previous paper, the two really important drivers are making sure that we've got good quality local school provision for our children with additional needs so that they can grow up with their peers. They don't have to travel too far. They don't spend a lot of time in taxis or their parents providing that taxi service. And for them to grow up within their local community, and then of course the cost avoidance that this provides for the dedicated schools grant, and therefore taking pressure off the whole system. Winchell Sea Special School provides places. It's, for those who don't know it, it's based in the Alderney area of BCP. It's consistently rated as good by Ofsted, and it has both the appetite and the capacity to deliver for some more of our local young people, particularly the older range. This paper enables the development of provision for 16 to 19-year-olds who often find it very difficult as they're preparing for adulthood. For children with additional needs, this would be a very welcome provision. In order to do so on its existing site, a new satellite provision will be required at Summerford Primary School, and that will enable over time up to 60 places for the younger children in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. So far, a very positive outlook for both groups, but I think it's important because members will have read the consultation that quite properly accompanied this paper, and I think what we just need to recognise is that the existing provision of which is a satellite of another outstanding of our special schools in Linwood. There's currently a 14-place unit on Summerford School site, and that will require reprovisioning. And reprovisioning Linwood has been central to delivering these plans. And unfortunately, I'm unable to give further details today, but I can give Cabinet some assurance that the governors of both schools have been involved and are very positive about the proposal for that relocation. And any parent who's still got any anxiety about that should stay in close touch with the Linwood parents and governors, and I'm sure they'll get some reassurance from that. Otherwise, the consultation amongst stakeholders has been very positive, and I'm very pleased to bring the recommendations forward. And I understand Councillor White, who knows a thing or two about special schools in Poole, is happy to second. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Thank you. Yes, Leader. Very happy to second this. Thank you. Great.
Thank you very much. Okay, so do we have any other members members of the wider council wishing to speak? I see nobody showing, so I will move on to the wider cabinet. I'll just underline effectively points have been made by there, Nicola. it's hugely important that we do address the provision around SEND. We've got some fantastic provision, but we don't have enough of it. And I think what really struck me from what you said was about allowing children to grow up and access education in their community, and in their locality, so they can build those friendship groups that will really support them. And this effectively is a prime example of that inclusion agenda around how we can support that. So just to add my real support to this, and I'm really pleased that the budget we discussed earlier on does also bring material funding to be able to unlock this, both in terms of net new provision, but probably as impactfully in terms of existing provision we can just enhance locally. So very happy for that. I don't have anybody else wishing to speak, so I will look to move that forward. If anybody,
Chairman, Nigel Brooks is indicating.
Okay, do apologise, Nigel. Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. I caught the mouse on the wrong icon. I apologise.
Oh, okay, not at all. Fantastic. That's great. There is some issue with my with Teams on my screen today, so Democratic will be calling people in as and when, just as a clarification if hands are showing. Okay, so we're moving this effectively to the vote, and I haven't seen anybody wish to raise, so we will go forward unanimously with the as printed. So that moves us forward to agenda item 13, which is the housing budget setting. Councillor Lawton, Bob.
Thank you, Leader. The HRA budget sets out the proposals regarding the rent, services and charges and other charges to tenants for the expenditure plans for 2021-22 within the Bournemouth and Poole neighbourhoods. Any increase in charges are in line with national policy, good practices and legislation. There are several measures in place which will help tenants who find these charges onerous. For example, housing benefit staff are available for help and support. The expenditure plan set out the budget required to manage and maintain the present stock, provide services to residents, as well as building new homes and completing major projects. 2020, as we are all aware, has been a challenging year because of the pandemic. But the impact on the HRA has not been as great as some of the other council services. There have been some reduction in services during national lockdowns, but most have continued, and I am pleased to say that we are up to date with all of our maintenance programmes for services to gas boilers, electric services, etc. within the council housing stock between Bournemouth and Poole. The impact of COVID-19 on the HRA has not, as I said earlier, been as significant. Both neighbourhoods are within target on rent collections, and I am pleased to say that we have lots of services available to people who may find themselves in difficulty within the period. The main highlights from the HRA budget are that rent is proposed to increase by 1.5% in the coming financial year. Last year, the rent increase was 2.7%, and this year we're proposing 1.5%. Garage rents we're also proposing will go up by 2%. Overall, this is a good budget. It's a £43 million budget overall for the HRA, or the Housing Revenue Account budget for Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch. Incidentally, it doesn't cover really Christchurch, as the housing stock in Christchurch is managed by Sovereign. And I recommend this to the Cabinet. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Bob. That's great. I'll come to Councillor Ramp second.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I am very happy to second this item. As Councillor Lawton has referred to, the increase of 1.5% is actually very modest, and we do have to remember that all our rental income after our debt repayment and stock maintenance supports new home delivery and acquisition of stock, of course, of existing buildings. We've got about 5,500 people on housing waiting lists, so that's really necessary to keep being able to supply and provide new homes for people. So I have no hesitation in supporting this item. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so this was viewed by overview and scrutiny with no formal recommendations. So I will come to Councillor Bartlett to check if there's anything you would like to add at this stage.
Yeah, nothing to add. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. So then, are any of the wider membership looking to address this paper? Not that I'm seeing or being advised of by Democratic, so I will move forward to our wider Cabinet colleagues. Would anybody like to again address this paper? No. Okay, that's great. So thank you very much for bringing that, Bob. That's well appreciated. So I'll move forward to the vote. If anybody would like to comment, if not, I will move forward with a unanimous decision, recording of a unanimous decision. No, not seeing anybody there. So very happy to move that forward. Thank you for bringing that forward, Bob. Moving to playing pitch strategy 2020-2033, and that has been brought to us by Councillor Anger. Mohan.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. The the playing pitches strategy, the timing of it couldn't be more appropriate for now. We've as a new cabinet, we've got intentions behind a significant uplift to how shall I put it, people back exercising in whatever form. So as soon as people, the general populace of the entire BCP, until as soon as people are allowed to be back out of the front door and being active in whatever form possible, and whatever form is their preference, we want to be right behind that, be encouraging that with, in general, with the facilities, the events, the wherewithal of really the best quality to enable people to get back their fitness, get back their sort of vibrancy, which, you know, sadly across the nation has dropped down a notch or two, especially so in the past year. The timing is good, but of course this is a strategy that hasn't just been ad hoc because of COVID. This has been in the work for some time. Credit to the officers involved in putting this together, and as you can see, not least from the length of documentation, it's a very sizable and in-depth piece of work. We've talked about, I've mentioned that exercise is absolutely central to health and well-being, and I will be very, very pleased at future cabinets to bring forward more papers. In addition to this one, the strategy here just talks about football, rugby union, cricket and hockey pitches, and it's a 12-year strategy going forward to 2033 for those 4 forms of outdoor team sports. It's cross BCP, and what we can expect going forward is that there'll be more papers and there'll be more initiatives covering, not least at April's cabinet, covering the indoor sports such as gymnasiums and other things. And also we'll be talking with my colleague Mark Anderson about things that we're developing in parks and so on and so forth. The purpose of this strategy in particular, why do we need such a strategy, is because first of all, it intercepts the local plan. The local plan, people tend to think about it as just the housing. Well, as my colleague Philip would say, it's not just the housing, it's actually a number of other things to do with roads, community facilities and various other things in the local plan. But of course, it's very, very important that we put a marker down for where we want outdoor sports to have their prominence in the conurbation. And we want to get in there quickly, and we need such a strategy to do that. So I'm very pleased we've got that. The second thing, and equally as important, is that it's an enabler for funding, not least. So by having this strategy and with the support of Support England, and of course credit here to Active Dorset for their participation in this piece of work, this strategy in a sense puts shows our credibility, shows our credentials with other associations, agencies and with government that we are worthy of funding, that we have a solid intention in this area, and that literally we want to take on big projects. We actually want to move forward with this intention. The deadline is set. The deadline set for 2033. I think the only last thing to say on this is that all the work is still yet to do, because the strategy lays out, in a sense, this is what we intend to do, but there's a lot of work going forward now with residents, with organisations, with businesses, those with a keen interest in this area, to work out when and how we'll implement this going forward. So I do absolutely recommend this to Cabinet members and encourage us to approve it and get started. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohan. That's great. I move to Councillor Anderson. Mark, to second.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to second this paper. I think Councillor Mohan has, Councillor Iyengar has given us a very extensive explanation of what the paper's about. I do agree with him about Active Doors. I think they've been very good at helping us, and they've come up with some very interesting comments. I also note in the paper that it does talk about the improving the health and well-being of the population of the town, and more importantly, increasing accessibility for those people who are less active and have difficulties in gaining access to sport generally, and also talks about the underrepresented parts of the population. So, Chairman, I think it's an excellent paper, and I'm very happy to second it.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you. So this didn't go to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, so I'll move to the wider membership, and we have Councillor Rice.
Hi, thanks very much. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a discussion that I'd had about this paper whilst it was going through during the summer and being worked on. So yes, thank you very much to Martin Kimberley for his work on this. It was highlighted that it's really a national issue, but I thought I would just highlight it to yourselves, is that when we look at sporting provision, there is an underlying assumption that people use a car to access the playing sports facilities. And so, for example, they will say, is a playing pitch within a 10-minute distance of people's homes, and actually they're assuming that's a 10-minute drive. And when we're talking about sort of social inclusion, and we're thinking about childhood obesity and the areas where childhood obesity is the most prevalent, and thinking about whether they have access to cars or whether their parents have time to drive them to playing pitches, it starts to get a little bit more complicated. So that was, and they were going to have a discussion with Sport England about this, but it was just to highlight that to yourselves, I suppose, that it's an interesting thing that isn't really being sort of explored sufficiently at present. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Rice. That's appreciated. Mohan, before we go to the wider cabinet, would you like to come back?
Yes, and thank you to Councillor Rice on this. I actually feel like starting with a sort of a personal response on this. I mean, I grew up in Manchester kicking a football in the street, and the reason for saying that, rather than just for amusement, is that we, in my view, and this of what the many things I may not know, actually, this is one where I've actually got a fair amount of personal experience. I've seen particularly the development of sort of, not quite the out of town sports facilities, but the ones which is in agreement with your point, where literally the only way you can get there is by the car, because it's big facilities and they're kind of, you know, they're off a main road junction or something like this. And what I particularly like about this, and in fact, you know, we could even go even further, is actually this is the thing about the local plan, about making sure that we protect even smaller spaces in between houses. In a sense, no matter how small they are, they're absolutely critical. Yeah, and this is the overlap with Councillor Anderson, myself, which is with parks and with actually designated pitches, making sure they absolutely remain, making sure they're accessible, making sure they're maintained with good quality, and they're the ones in a sense where people can walk to them. Yeah, people not having to travel, you know, oddly enough, to do their exercise, travel there in a car. They're able, it's close to them. It's literally right there for them, and we want to improve the quality of those things. So literally sport and activity and exercise is close to them, and therefore it's part of their lifestyle and not something they're just going to do sort of once a fortnight when they jump in the car. So I hope I'm sort of getting your concern exactly in the spirit you said it, because you can see I kind of feel a bit rather strongly about this myself, and thank you for your point.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks both. That's really that really brought it forward, didn't it? Okay, so I'll move on to the rest of the cabinet. Would anybody like to speak? I have Councillor Dove. Bobby.
Good morning, and I would like to thank Councillor Rice for the points that she has raised, but I would like to reassure her that is absolutely a conversation that we have had with both the portfolio holder and with the officers. So as part of the wider EQIA, as we look at strategies stemming out of this paper, the conversations we have had is when we're looking at pitches and we look at how we devise those pitches for future use, one of them will be how close they are to the transport system, the paths to and from bus stops, lighting, pavements. Of course, this would obviously be in relation to women who perhaps are using transport, because we obviously need them to be safe to and from our disabled cohorts and the socioeconomic cohort who perhaps wouldn't have access to two cars if one's being used or a car at all. So I just really wanted to reassure Councillor Rice some really good points that we have spoken about them, and or the public will see this all stemming out of papers and strategies coming from this this submission. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Really appreciated. Okay, do we have any other members wishing to speak? Which I do not see any, so I'll just pause briefly in case Democratic would like to highlight me of anybody, which I'm not seeing. So then we move forward. Thank you very much, Sarah. So then we'll move forward to the vote. And I'm not seeing anybody wish to raise on terms of recommendation, so I will take that forward as unanimous support. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much for Councillor Rice for adding to the debate there as well. Much appreciated. Okay, so then I believe that gets us to the last item on the agenda, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. I'll just bring in Graham Farrant at this point. We had some conversation about the update of the Forward Plan yesterday. Graham.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, apologies. I think there's a couple of items just to amend on the Forward Plan. One is that we have agreed we're going to try and bring forward a regeneration overview paper to the next Cabinet meeting, which we don't think will contain a key decision. So there's not a problem, but we do like to keep everybody in scrutiny fully updated on all items that are coming forward in case they want to review them. So there'll be an item to be added on regeneration overview, and then an item to go in April, I think, on the planning service and how we're improving that. I do believe that the item on pool regeneration is no longer coming in April. So just a couple of minor amendments. But again, not key decisions or not key decisions outside the timescale, but we'll make that amendment and recirculate if that's okay with Cabinet.
Yeah, great, and I appreciate that. Thank you for that update. I've just come in to move over to Councillor Broadhead briefly, where in relation to the theory behind the papers and why the pool paper is now being subsumed with a wider regeneration paper. So, Councillor Broadhead, Phil.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, just to confirm, the reason for the removal of the high street, the pool regeneration paper is that we hope to encapsulate that in the regeneration paper that will be coming forward next month, which will be looking at how we are going to really deliver on regeneration across the whole BCP area. And then, as the Chief Executive has pointed out, there's a tremendous amount of work in the planning department going on as well, both in terms of dealing with some of the issues that we clearly have at the moment, the extra resource that we're putting in, and the big plan for that going forward from May as well. So all of those very much interlinked, but yes, the pool side of it is very much encapsulated within the big plan for regeneration. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks both. Do we have any other comments on the forward plan? I'm not seeing anybody raise to speak, so that's all very noted. So that just leaves it for me to close the meeting. Thank everybody for their participation today. Thank you for those members of the public, watching online, both in live and also through catch up. We really appreciate your engagement in this. Just to underline, we believe there's a really enticing and ambitious, budget with low counter tax. There's a big vision and some significant papers coming forward in terms about special education needs as well. So thank you for the business we've been able to get done today, members, and thank you for your support. Okay.